Hello? Who is this? This is Roger L. Jackson, Ghostface, from the Scream franchise, and you're listening to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Review Podcast. So you like scary movies, huh? What's your favorite scary movie? And it better be the right answer, or well, you know the rest. Thank you. You're such a lovely audience. We'd like to take you home with us. Or better yet, see you in your home.
In a world where zombies, ghosts, serial killers, and vampires all exist, welcome to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Don't Go Out There Horror Movie Review Podcast. This is episode 3. This is a highly anticipated one by all of the hosts of the show. This one might get a little controversial, maybe a little bit physical. Just kidding. But if in person, maybe so.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to review briefly. We're actually going to review this movie a little quicker than the past two because we have... it's not an argument, but it's just we have a difference of beliefs of how this movie should be categorized, I guess you could say. We're going to be reviewing Scream from 1996, the original, the introduction of Ghostface. And, this was a genre-changing movie. It was kind of in the middle of, your famous slashers kind of dying down and, where do we go from here, This would probably be considered the introduction of meta horror, I guess you could call it. And I know two of my co-hosts are big fans of it, and we all are, but for different reasons. But we're going to jump right into the opening scene. And I think the thing that's kind of coincidental about the first 3 movies we recorded is they all have a very, very, very great opening scene that gets you right into the movie.
Right.
So we're introduced to Drew Barrymore, who's playing the role of Casey, and she's at the house by herself, and she gets a random phone call, and she's like, she doesn't know who it is, blah, 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 so she hangs up. They call back again, and this guy is, he's saucing on her. He's trying to get to talk to her. He's trying to get to know her. She's talking about how she's single, even though she's not single. These girls be tricking out here. Brian, do one of y'all want to handle this opening scene? Because this is probably, one of the most famous scenes of all time in horror movie history.
Hey, go ahead, Brian. Take it away, man.
Yeah, so, I know Halloween was Mike's favorite horror movie. I think that this was I think this one might be mine. The opening scene, to me, it rivals, dare I say, Halloween's openings. In my opinion, I'm just going to say it. I think it's the best opening to a horror movie of all time. That's just me. I love how self-aware this movie is. I love how in the opening scene, the biggest name on the poster, Drew Barrymore, is filleted with her guts hanging out in the front yard. It lets you say, it's aware of all the horror tropes and it's going to try to break them.
Right, man. That's why I love it too. And I know the self-aware part of it is kind of a turnoff for some people, but I think it really I think after a rewatch, like you watch it the first time, maybe it doesn't click for you, but you watch it again, you go, oh, I see. There's a lot of little things, even in that opening scene that you catch on a rewatch. And like you said, I love the kill of Drew Barrymore. And that ended up being her idea. Like they wanted her for the role of Sydney. And she's like, no, I think it would be much better, much cooler, and I only have a certain amount of time, so why don't we kill me early? Put my face on the poster. That makes a lot of sense. And they killed her off early. It's very, and this is another trope that they kind of used because Psycho did it with Janet Leigh and Marion Crane. She was the biggest name at the time, and Alfred Hitchcock used her to advertise the movie. and they killed her in the shower. And so it's very reminiscent of that. And so I love this opening scene. Just, bitch, if you hang up, I'll gut you like a fish. Like, I love that little, like, I love how it's like, it's funny, but the music kind of doesn't make it funny for me. Like, I know it's a little bit ha-ha, but it's also self-aware. And I think that's why you hear normal people comments, not just like, weird serial killer stuff. Like, he's clearly just a normal guy.
Drew, go ahead and jump in here real quick about this opening scene.
I'm gonna say, like, I'm with Mike and with Brian on both this. They both said that it's one of the greatest open scenes. I agree. I would never. I just want to put it out there. I do not hate this movie. I
Drew,
do
why do
not
you
hate this movie. I do not hate this movie. Steven Rodriguez. I do not hate this movie. I actually love this movie. I love this movie. But the opening scene, like y'all said, it's great. It's very, like, Drew Barrymore, they're coming up and saying, nobody when they saw this movie in the 90s, and you also got to think, like, in the 90s, like, this movie actually brought the slasher films back into, like, the mainstream.
It brought
like,
horror
without
back.
that, it brought it back. Yeah, without
Yeah.
a doubt, it brought it back. Yeah, so I'm not like gonna debate like what it did or didn't
Right.
do. It's just, the opening scene is great. Drew Barrymore was great. Everybody within it.
And by the
did
way,
their thing. There was a
yeah.
reason why.
And by the way, shout out to Wes Craven. The way he shot this opening scene, it's just, he had kind of had a couple stinkers before this. New Nightmare, which is also meta, we talked about a little bit. It's a little meta, but it's not as wink and nod as this movie. But this, the way he shoots this opening scene, man, it shows that he's probably the best horror director outside of John Carpenter.
Well,
Agreed.
and can I say
Agreed.
something? I just want to jump in too. Wes Craven's not. I mean, I think Wes Craven took it to the next level, but all the credit to me, I think, goes to Kevin Williamson
Absolutely,
for
absolutely.
the script. I mean, and I read that he was just a fan of old school slashers, like me and you and all of our listeners. He wanted to revitalize it back to
Good ones.
what we all knew and loved.
Right.
And I mean, it certainly did to some degree, but almost all of the and I was in high school in the 90s, so it was maybe a little bit different, experiencing it when it was big, but for me, but I love all the horror movies of the 90s. I didn't find out later that I loved. I didn't find out till later that Kevin Williamson wrote them all. The
Yeah.
Faculty, I Know Last Summer, Scream 2, Halloween H2O, like he was a producer on that. Like those were, anyway, I just wanted to make sure Kevin Williamson got his due in that.
Absolutely, big shout out.
Yeah, I wrote down in my notes. We won't stay on this opening scene too much longer, but I wrote down that this is just an amazing portrayal of just psychological terror on somebody. I really like the fact that he's like quizzing them on horror movies and like who is the main villain in this movie, who is it in this one, and I wrote down in quotations whenever the caller says, "I want to know who I'm looking at," I was like, "Oh shit." That's when it got real, because the look that Drew Barrymore puts on her face, you're like, you start to feel the internal, the internal, oh crap, what's going on here? He sees me, he knows who he's talking to right now. That's a situation that I can put myself into the shoes of that person really good. And before we move on, I really want to say that the boyfriend's death is really really brutal too.
Yeah.
That's pretty horrifying too. The only nitpick I have of the beginning scene is she gets choked a little bit and she can't scream, but she's got the phone in her hand. Why don't she just throw that at her parents to like get some attention towards it instead of Mom, that's my only nitpick of that part. I'm not going to jump on it too bad.
Ain't gonna lie, brother. You're applying logic to an illogical situation.
Yeah, I'm just
And I
I'm
do
just,
it too. I do it too.
But the thing is, if we're getting attacked by somebody, we don't know who the hell it is. It's easy to judge it when you're not in the situation. So,
Right.
But that's my only nitpick of the opening scene is just throw the phone at him or something.
Right.
It's like don't try and fake scream or nothing.
Right.
Y'all got any more final thoughts on this opening scene before we start
just
moving on?
Just a classic opening scene, man.
No,
Yeah,
it's great. It's a great opening scene. It's a great opening scene. Like the music score that goes along with it. Like
Yes.
it's a great. See, I'm going to defend it in a lot of ways because like I love this movie in a lot of ways. The only thing is the classic.
We'll wait.
For
Make
me.
him tease,
Like,
brother. Tease him.
But I mean, it's great in the opening scene just because like the way they lead it up and like the drama that comes with it, like, and then you got the music that comes with it. Like I am a big fan. Like, hey, if the scene's gonna be great, drop a good musical right beside it. It's gonna make it
agree.
that much better.
I agree.
But yeah, opening scene's great.
By
That's
the
fair,
way,
yep.
Halloween H2O ended up using like that same score. I think it was by accident, but they used like the same song. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, I will say this is just me personally. After I rewatched it the other night, I'm really not trying to hate because it is a great movie, but it's like after this scene, to me, it kind of goes. I don't want to say downhill, but the kind of the terror you feel from the random call kind of just drops a little bit to me but we'll move on. After this scene, we're in all right, we're in Sydney's house now. She's in her PJs, and this dude sneaks up into her room from the window, Billy. This to me is just kind of a exposition filler scene, I guess.
Right.
He comes into the room, she screams, and the dad tries to walk into the room. Nothing big going on. She's like, I thought I heard her scream. No, you didn't hear nothing. Billy's trying to put the Mac on her. She gives him, lets him get to first base maybe. He's like, why can't we do nothing? Why don't we do nothing no more? Well, it's because my mom's dead, or So that scene to me, all it does is really just kind of paint the portrait of their relationship. Is that what you guys think as well?
Oh yeah, it
Yeah.
sets what they need to get set in it earlier, and then like how many different scary / movies that we got that there's always no horny teenagers. There's
It's
always
every-
a horny teenager.
It's every horror movie, man, or just about every slasher movie. I put it that way.
I mean, all of it together. It's just that
Right.
you always got to have that one, but he sets it up to where that you get that emotional connection between the two characters, and
Right.
then they're like, hey, guess what? We're gonna kind of fuck that up.
Well, hey, the only thing I can really take away from this scene, and I don't know if they do it here, but every time I see it, I'm reminded his name is Billy Loomis, which shout out to the Loomis name from actually Psycho first, but then Halloween as well. So shout out to the Loomis name, little Easter egg there. The whole movie is meta. Sorry, Drew.
Yeah, there's a lot of references to other movies, which I'm not hating. I'm not hating.
Right.
They get a little egregious at times, but anyways, Brian, you got any thoughts on this scene before we move on?
No, I mean, I like how it sets up their relationship a little bit, that you're going to see throughout the film, the tension, and it kind of gives you a little bit of backstory on, it's almost like, hey, it's almost acting like there was a movie before it, but there really wasn't. Like,
Right.
It gives you enough backstory that there could have been, I guess is what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, I see. I didn't even think about that. Like,
Yeah,
like,
that's really
the
well
way they
done.
set it up. It kind of makes you say, "Hey, guess what? These guys were kind of set up before." Yeah, I didn't even think about that, but that's a good point.
So after this scene, we go where the next day the police and the news are at the school, and they're investigating the murders. They're they're interviewing people. They're kind of taping stuff off, and it transitions into the 5 teens. They're sitting around this waterfall. It's Sydney, Billy, Stewart, Randy, and Tatum. They're all just discussing, and to me, guys, after the first time I watched this movie, I was really like didn't know what was going on. But after you rewatch it and you know what happens, the two guys kind of give it away what they did it. You know what I'm saying? Just
A
because
little bit, yeah.
just the way they look at each other, the way they go a little extra with their jokes about how somebody should die. Go ahead, Mike.
So I think there's a point to that. A point
go ahead.
was that so they could not be so obvious, but they wanted to let some people know that would pick up on it that these might be the two killers, but then they make you second guess it because it's kind of in your face. So you're like, that's too obvious. It has to be somebody else.
Yeah, it
So I
can't be
think
that
that's kind of
obvious.
right. So I think it's kind of a swerve. And by the way, later on, we'll get to it. They give a good red herring for Billy, where they're like, it wasn't Billy, and they give Billy an alibi. And
Right.
at the time, you're only thinking there's one killer. So after a rewatch, yeah, it's definitely like, duh. Especially because Stu is so freaking weird. I love Matthew Lillard, but he's a freaking weirdo in this movie, man. Hit me with the phone, dick.
Yeah, I actually, well, I'll save it for the end for some stuff we talk about. But yeah, Stewart is he kind of gives it away with his facial expressions and all that throughout this movie. Brian, you got any thoughts on this scene where they're discussing the murders and all that?
Well, I mean, and that's another thing about this movie. It's one of the first ones where it's not coming in, you're not coming in knowing, okay, well, Freddy's the killer in this movie, Jason's the killer in this movie.
Right.
It's a mystery who the killers
like
are.
that. I like it a lot.
And right, you don't go in knowing, and you go on the journey like with the cast kind of. And I know a lot of movies kind of stole that after, like, oh, okay, who's the killer? But this was the first one. Just like Halloween set up a whole lot of stuff, this was the first one. And like you said, they do give it away, but I agree. I think that it's in that scene especially that they're trying to be like, okay, look, here's who we want you to think the killer is, and so you're second guessing yourself, like, oh, they're not telling me that already,
right?
And like you said, they go on with it. So
yeah, there's a lot of crumbs like they want you to maybe follow, and it's like, hey, look this way, but then again, hey, we could go this way.
Because there's a part of me that whole movie, the first time I ever saw it, that was convinced it was Randy. It made a whole lot of sense for the horror nerd to be the horror killer. Like, it made a lot of, and by the way, Randy as a character, since we're talking about the characters, is kind of us. Like, he's kind of us. He's a representation of people like us that love horror movies and break it down the way that we break it down here. And so Randy is, man, R.I.P. Randy in Scream 2. That was bullshit. But anyway.
Spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert, yeah.
Hey,
wow.
A spoiler alert for a movie that's 20 years old. Kiss the fattest part of my ass.
Yeah, I was thinking that actually after the first episode, guys, we're not giving those spoiler alerts. If you jump into this, you better know what we're talking about.
Yeah, be ready, because it's coming out.
It would be different if we reviewed The Joker last week. That would have made sense. Like, might have had to give a spoiler alert, but we're not. So we're viewing a movie over 20 years old now.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is crazy because like I remember that was like probably one of the most popular movies. Is like I was in high school. Like it was the most popular movie going up. Man. And then now you're just like, man, was that really 20 years ago? And it was
over 23 years ago.
Yeah, I remember being like 6, 7 years old or whatever. Well, when we watched it, me and my mom rented it for us because we kept saying we wanted to watch it, and the neighborhood kids were over. And and that first scene was playing, we was like, we're scared. She's like, nah, y'all wanted it. You gonna watch it. So I remember being on the couch watching it, scared to death.
That was me with Halloween H2O. Same
but,
thing.
I feel so old right now. I feel so old. He's talking about like I'm in like 6, 7, 8 years old. I'm like,
hey, I was 5, man.
But
I was in high school too, Drew. That's good.
Oh, you old people.
Anyway,
after he's up in here.
That's right. Hey, we got two different, not two whole different generations, but y'all got like about a decade on us, so y'all got a more wise experience and perspective than us. So that's cool. But after this scene where they're out at the waterfall talking about the kills, we're with Sydney. She's at her house, and whenever Billy snuck in, her dad and Sydney were talking about how he's going out of town for business, so she don't want to stay at home by herself. So she's going to stay at Tatum's house. So she's packing up, getting all her stuff ready. She turns the TV on, and literally everything on TV is about the murder, and she ain't feeling it really, so she takes a nap. She wakes up, and the phone rings. And here comes round 2. Mike, do you want to handle this scene real quick?
Well, as far as like the scene breakdown, I don't have that many notes on it, but I have a notes on why this scene is good and why this scene really fits the movie, and they kind of get a couple different things, okay? So for one, we should probably mention that Sydney's mom was murdered a year before the events of this movie.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the tie-in to pretty much the rest of the franchise comes from, as far as the sequels that carry on and ends up tying into the ending of this movie. So that's one big thing that we left out. We probably should have mentioned. Number 2, they kind of flip a good horror. They flip a horror trope on its head. Because 9 times out of 10, the final girl doesn't meet the killer until the end. And in this movie, they flip that, and you get a showdown between Sydney and Ghostface very, very early on. Where there's a point where the first time I saw it, I'm like, are they gonna kill it? Like, who's surviving this movie? Because it was like he's got a knife on the neck, and you just didn't know. Especially because what you just saw was Drew Barrymore die. So you're coming back, and you're like, are they gonna do this again? Who's surviving? And so I think they did that movie really well. And by the way, I might be alone in this, but Dewey in this film can go to hell.
Oh my God, he's the worst, bro.
Oh, I got
He's
those
like
in my
the absolute
cons. I got
worst. And
those
I'm
on
not
my
a big fan of that guy's acting for anyways, but he's the worst in this.
In this scene, and they end up arresting Billy, and I don't know if I'm jumping ahead, but I think that I mentioned it earlier. Great red herring, because there's a point where, well, that makes a lot of sense. There was just Ghostface here, Billy's here. I could put two and two together. That makes a lot of sense, but and we'll get to it. They do a scene later on that kind of gives Billy a good alibi.
Yeah, like you were saying, they arrest Billy, but the thing is, Sydney, she's not really that scared in this call.
I love her in this call.
Because the caller is saying, all the same stuff, and she walks outside, looking around, she's picking her nose. What am I doing then? What am I doing?
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
she goes back in the house, and Ghostface comes after her. She gets away. Then, as she runs up the stairs, all of a sudden, Billy climbs up into her room again, like impeccable timing. And then a phone falls out of his pocket, and she's like, "You son of a bitch, it's you, isn't it?"
Yeah.
Well,
I love that, though.
Yeah,
I love that.
Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, no, and that's what I was talking about, them being like, hey, this really super obvious, and then you start double,
Yeah.
about it. The one thing about this scene I will say is I like how it's trying to play on the horror cliches while trying to subvert them too, because Sydney is on the phone telling him that she hates horror movies because big-breasted bimbos running up the stairs when she could go out the door, and then not 5 seconds later her ass is running up the stairs.
Right. It's just no. I mean, I think that's great, man. And by the way, we should probably mention, since it's 1996 and she looks, yeah. Courtney Cox is Gail Weathers, also a big part of this scene as far as after they arrest Billy, anyways.
I'm definitely a fan of the female cast from
Oh,
an
I mean,
attraction
honestly, if you
perspective.
think about it, like they cast this movie so well for what it was. Like every character was cast spot on.
It
Like,
took a lot of
spot
TV, a lot of teen TV stars, gave them their first movie role. I think that was really smart because the audience they wanted to attract was teens. Because that's who.
I'm sorry. Some big names actually turned these roles down. Joaquin Phoenix turned the role down.
I saw that.
Oh God, I'm drawing a blank. What was the lady in Walk the Line with him? She turned the role down too.
Reese Witherspoon.
Reese Witherspoon. Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't even
I'm
know
glad
that
it's
one.
Sydney.
I didn't even know that one.
I'm very glad that both of them turned it down.
They
That makes me happy.
Yeah, they linked up later in the Johnny Cash movie, so
Right.
karma worked out good for them. Y'all got any more thoughts on this scene before we move on?
I like
this
that
a
scene
scene-
a lot.
Is this the scene also where, like you said, she was falling asleep because they were watching the newscast? Is this the scene where they introduce Cotton Weary for the first time too? So they throw that out there, like,
Yeah,
oh shit,
yeah.
well, there's somebody else that could be. There's
As
somebody
far
else
as
that could be.
as
the
far as
killer.
I know, I think that's the scene they first mentioned, Cotton Weary.
Okay.
You know, that's great. I think that's one of the greatest things about this movie here is the whole who done it. Like the who done it is
Right.
like the main focus, like through the whole movie. And that's one of the kind of movies I love those type of movies where I'm like, okay,
I
let's
love
figure
those
this
movies.
out.
Yep.
Well, it could have been them. It could have been that. And I love that the whole way through. Like I could not figure it out to the end. And I can't stand movies that I can just pick off within 30 seconds. Oh yeah, it's that guy or that girl. So that's the one thing I love about this
Right.
movie. Is like the whole way through, I'm like, I don't know who the fuck did this.
Yeah, that's why I like the Saw franchise so much, which we'll discuss further down the road.
Oh, we're going to.
Anyway, now after Billy sneaks into the room, Sydney goes to leave outside, and Deputy Dewey is out there with a ghost face mask, and they arrest Billy right then. They go back to the police department, and Tatum shows up. Billy's saying, "You know it wasn't me. You know it wasn't me."
You know me.
And she won't even look at this guy in the face. She's like so fed up with this guy right now. And this is a funny scene to me. They sneak him out the back door, and shout out to, we haven't really talked about Courtney Cox yet, Gail, but we are now. Now she shows up. She's we don't really know what's going on with Gail and Sydney at the moment, but you can feel there's some tension between these two.
Right.
And they look at each other right in the face, and she's not really answering these questions like she wants to. And then shout out to the side girl Tatum, because she gives her the old cross to the old cheek, and Gail ain't ready for this this hit. What y'all's thought on that little scene, real quick?
It
I think
adds
it,
a layer of spiciness for sure.
yeah,
I
it
love it, man.
introduces the tension between Gail and Sydney. I like that a lot.
Hmm. And you know, honestly, Sydney's probably my absolute favorite in this one. She's like my favorite character.
She's probably, man, I know. I tell a lie every week. I say, this is my favorite final girl, I swear. But I am serious. This is my favorite final girl. My favorite. She is awesome.
Well, I have it written down the same thing, dude. Sydney's
Yeah.
my favorite final girl
Oh
too.
yeah,
But
Sydney's without a doubt.
but you can tell Craven had a lot to do with this one because
Yes.
Sydney is a lot like Nancy
A
from
lot like, so that's why I really like the both of them. And
Yeah.
Laurie Strode from the first Halloween, even though it's my favorite, she can go to hell.
So Brian, it's like what draw Brian for you? What draws you the same conclusions like Nancy and Sydney on this? Like what characteristics draw the same character draw
Well,
it in for you?
Well, I just mean, and not jumping to the end, but I mean, just how she is, at first, she's a little bit worried about it, a little scared, but then when she's had enough, I mean, she's had enough. Like both of them were just like, okay, they're ready to fight, they're ready to take care of business, whereas I think, honestly, Jamie Lee Curtis spent the whole movie running around in Halloween scared to death and just, had to do what she wanted to do. Both of the, was that a beer opening? Both of these, girls, they were like, all right, cool, we're ready to fight. We've had enough of it, and it's ready to go. And that kind of carries on from once that clicks. Sydney is she's going to beat your ass in 2 and 3 and 4, and she's done being scared.
Right.
Agreed. I was just
That's
kind
why I
of
love
wondering
her.
because
Yep.
it's like with Sydney, like I loved it because she just like, okay, this is kind of a little bit fucked up, but then it was like, okay, it's time to go now. Let me figure this out. She's
Very
like,
Nancy. Very Nancy like.
she's kind of Thelma like Scooby Doo. Let's figure this out. Let's get this down.
I like it.
All right, now after this scene, after they leave the police station and Gail gets punched in the face, we're back at Tatum's house, and there's a phone call for Sydney, and it's Ghostface again, and she's kind of freaking out now, and as they try and get Dewey in there to listen to the call, whatever he hangs up. So now they're freaking out a little bit. Do y'all want to talk about this scene too much or just keep going? I don't think there's really too much depth to it.
It's just funny because I have it on in the background, and that's literally the scene it's on. So that's good.
The only thing I want to say is completely
Dewey's-
agree with.
right.
The only thing I want to say is completely agree with Mike is that on my cons list, Dewey is. I mean, he's in this movie. Like that's the biggest thing about this. And I know they fix it some in the sequels.
I'm about to
but
say
in
he's
this
good
one,
in Scream 2.
Right. And
To jump ahead.
and on. I mean, he's a little bit more like a
Right.
normal human being. In this one,
He's a big man child.
He's a dumbass.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how he became a deputy, but more police than deputy. He must be from
Deputy
Haddonfield.
Dewey.
Deputy Dewey. Look
He's
at
probably-
Cotton Weary. Look at
He's
that.
probably trying to figure out why they would steal a rope and a mask and a knife.
I mean,
Yeah.
we talked
Oh.
we talked about last episode talking about inept, sheriffs and whatever. Like this is like beyond inept when it comes to Sheriff Dewey.
You know
Oh,
the
and-
thing.
And
Go
his
ahead,
sister,
Brian.
And his sister Tatum totally disrespects him in front of everybody in that police station on the way out. It's like,
Dresses
"Sorry,
his ass
Deputy
down,
Dewey."
son.
I know Wes Craven was a big John Carpenter fan. I wonder if he makes Deputy Dewey inept, kind of like the Haddonfield Police. I don't know if that might
I
be.
think
that
I'm not
might be
gonna
me
lie.
digging in too deep into it. I don't know.
So I think Kevin Williamson wrote that way because every police in every slasher is inept, and so I
Yeah.
think it's like, let's make him kind of silly.
Beyond that.
Right. He's a sympathetic character in a way, especially towards the end. But I don't like his story. His story arc doesn't do a whole lot for me.
No, I agree. All right, so now we're back at school the next day. Sydney runs into Billy in the hallway. Billy is not sympathetic at all towards Sydney about her mother's death because it's like almost, I think the next day it's a year later. Billy's kind of like, it's been a year, get over it, He's like, he brings up the fact that his dad left and whatever. He's like, you got to get over this stuff. So Sydney goes into the bathroom and she's in the stall by herself. But there's these two other girls talking bad about her, blah, 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 blah. She's saying that he probably done it. Then the girls leave, You know, she goes into the she exits the stall and she's looking in the mirror. Then, and very subtly, you can hear the name Sydney, Sydney, and she's like thinking she's hearing stuff, but now she's like ducking down, looking underneath the stalls. Is somebody in here? Somebody in here? She's looking in the vents, and then you see two boots drop, and the ghost face costume cape or whatever. You see it. So now we're about to have Sydney versus Ghostface Part 3. Brian, do you have any thoughts on this scene, or you want to break it down real quick?
Well, no, I mean, I'll just say that, I love this movie, but, I can acknowledge its faults too. And to me, like,
I was gonna say
this is the worst scene in the whole movie
this
to
scene
me.
sucks.
And actually, I mean, it's dumb. It's not logical at all how it could work. I mean,
Right.
but I will say that Williamson actually didn't like this scene and didn't want it in there.
The West scene. It's a
Right,
Wes
this
Craven.
is a totally Wes Craven scene in there at all. And I mean, I know when it was done, I think Williamson said, "Oh yeah, you're right, it's great," but no,
Yeah,
it's
he
not.
lied.
It's dog shit.
It sucks. He lied to Wes Craven because that scene's awful. I don't even have any other thoughts other than that's probably the worst scene in the movie to me.
I agree.
Well, that's kind of interesting. I didn't think it was the worst scene in the movie, but
Well, you guys hate the movie, obviously. So,
I don't hate. We don't hate this
I'm
movie.
just
You gotta
kidding.
quit setting it up like we hate the movie
I'm
just because
just
we have
kidding.
a different opinion on what it's. What
Oh, I'm
it's
just
bad.
kidding.
Like, we don't hate the movie.
Just kidding, haters.
All right, after this scene, the principal is kind of like walking around. You know, he's investigating the school. I think this is a scene where he like suspends two guys for dressing up like Ghostface
Yeah.
or whatever. You know, he's here's a reference. Wes Craven is actually dressed like Freddy Krueger as the janitor.
Yeah,
He's got the
Fred.
red and green sweater and or not the cowboy hat, but the fedora on. Then the principal walks this room. He starts. He's looking in the closet. There's nothing in there. He's looking around. Nothing. Then he closes the door. Then Ghostface pops out and gets a pap, which stabs him in the gut and drops him. Do y'all got any thoughts on this scene, real quick, Brian?
Hey. It's
yeah,
the
I mean,
Fonz.
as much as I love the Fonz, man, he could have done a little bit better acting in this scene.
You don't say.
But
He's always going to be Mr. Coach Klein to me.
Coach Klein.
Mr. Klein. Well, yeah, that shows your age right there, man. Just that you're that he's Waterboy Coach Klein. to you.
Exactly. Tell him, Brian. Tell him.
Hey, I said Fonz.
Hey, I'll tell you this. Like, it just goes to say, hey, like in Zombieland, double tap, baby. Tap tap. You rap.
But I mean, I'm glad that's there. Like, it's not super logical. I mean, that there would be 0 people, in the school. There's a lot of problems with the scene, but I do understand why it's there because you see it kind of come back in the third scene where, the big third act of the film where, everybody leaves to go, see him apparently hanging up on in the goalpost, gutted,
Right.
and then it leaves just your main characters in the house by itself. So I understand the point, or why it's there, and what the setup is later. As it's seen by itself, though, yeah, I mean it could use some work.
This kill is in the running for the worst kill of the movie to me. But Mike, you got any thoughts on this scene, real quick?
Well, my grief with the kills in this franchise. Stabs to the neck, stabs to the back, stabs to the gut, stabs to the ass. Like whatever. Like, and I know there's some better kills in this first one. We'll touch on it later. The stew kill, the garage kill, which we'll get to. But
Hey, easy
I mean,
now.
okay.
Easy.
Okay. But other than that, and throughout the rest of the franchise, it's very stab. Sequels come later, and the movie within the movie is stab. So I kind of get that. I understand that. But at the same time, as far as a negative from this movie, the kills don't really do a whole lot for me, except the opening 2 with the guts hanging out. And by the way, that ties into later is how do you gut someone? And you start from sternum to yeah. But still, the kills don't do a whole lot for me.
Drew, you got anything about this principal kill, or do you want to go ahead and just move on?
No, we can go ahead and move on. There's nothing like fantastic about it, nothing terrible about it. I mean, like Brian said, like it sets up something later on in the movie, which we understand why once we get to that part.
Right.
And honestly, That doesn't make sense to me either, but we'll get to that later. Due to all the deaths in the town has put on a curfew, and let me flip my notes on my page real quick.
I'm not gonna lie, guys. I'm at the scene where they're talking shit about Sydney in the bathroom, and I feel so, man, my heart hurts for Nev. She delivers that scene so emotional. I'm gonna call her and make sure she's still okay.
All right, now after this part right here is where I start to wonder, like, what is this town doing? Because Deputy Dewey, after this scene, drops Sydney and Tatum off at a house party, a high school house party. What is going on right now? You know what I'm saying? Does this make sense at all right now that you guys?
Not at all.
I have never been invited to a party like that before ever in my life.
But that was the satire. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just
Oh,
saying
was
that
it
was
now?
clearly the direction they were going for, was to make you think this is stupid, you idiots. Like, I think that's kind of the trope they were playing on.
I don't
that's just
know.
where
I
I give
mean,
them.
I don't know. It's a small town thing. I mean, and you get the
Oh,
small
that's for
town
sure.
thing with the curfew. You've got the really small
Yep.
town issue with the Inev Police Department.
Yep.
And those house parties like that, where around here it was going out in the cornfields and having a big bonfire house party type thing.
Mhm.
Like, it's a small
Mhm.
town thing, man.
Where I
It's a
met my
small town
ex-wife.
thing. So I can give them that. I can give 'em
Yeah. So after they get dropped off at this house party, Gail and her cameraman show up in their rigged out van, and Gail's got she's got an idea in mind. She's going to sneak into this party. So she gets with Deputy Dewey, and she's got a camera she's going to drop off so she can watch what's going on in there. She gets inside with Dewey. She drops his camera off. I think it's on top of the VCR, I guess, or whatever. And so now the guy in the van can watch everything they're doing. He can see everything they're doing, but there's a 30-second delay, which will come into play in a little bit. And now, Stewart and Tatum, they're a couple. They're, hanging out. And he's like, hey, go to the garage and get us a beer. So she's like, okay. So she goes and gets a beer for both of them. And then all of a sudden the door closes and Ghostface shows up. This is probably, outside of the opening kill, is probably my most memorable kill, probably. No, my man Brian's shaking his head. And Mike, oh no. All right, go ahead, Brian. Go ahead, Brian.
Hey, we
Tell me
disagree.
about it.
It's okay. There's nothing wrong with that.
Go ahead.
I
mean, it's it is stupid that a grown woman tries to sneak out of a dog door, but the kill is recognized, or it's memorable,
It's definitely a memorable kill, but just real quick, the
Because it's
logic
so
of
terrible.
the logic of that
exactly.
garage door holding her weight is not, that ain't it, Chief.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's exactly what I was gonna say.
That's what it was, man. She didn't have some big tatas. She would have been all right.
I was gonna say her flotation devices caused that. Man, we're gonna get kicked off. Whatever we're on. Kicked off. No, so I don't. Okay, I talked about it earlier. I don't necessarily hate the garage kill. It's just, and it is memorable, but it's definitely not my favorite of the movie. Like it gets a thumbs down just because it lacks logic. I know we've kind of said that's kind of the whole point of the movie a little bit, but even this kill is kind of like, I'll pass. Like, I actually think I would have just rather had a cutaway kill. Like, just like stab to the neck, stab to the back, stab to the gut. Right.
See, Mike, you don't complain about all the kills being stabbed.
I
finally get
know.
something different.
Well, this different sucks. Kind of like Halloween Resurrection, but
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Taking low blows here.
I love
One
you, buddy.
thing I did write down on my notes was all the Tatum and Sydney. They put up a pretty good fight against
Yeah, they
Ghostface
do.
for a majority of the part. She's hitting him with bottles. She's hitting him in the head with the freezer door. It's like, to me, it's like when you knock the dude over with the freezer door, like, start kicking the shit out of him while he's down. Don't try
I agree.
and crawl out the dog door. Do y'all got any more thoughts on this death, or we can?
Nah, we can move.
Yeah.
We can move just like she tried to move out that doggy door.
No, we're
R.I.P.
getting
to her,
stuck.
'cause, man.
I wrote down in my notes right after this. I guess there were some facial gestures made, but I wrote down Billy and Stewart are so obvious the killers at this point.
Yeah, I know.
Uh-huh.
Especially upon a rewatch, you're
Yeah.
kind of like, this
And
is obvious.
Yeah, after that scene, they're all the people are watching Halloween on VHS.
Yeah,
Randy kind of gives them, the spill on what you
love
don't do or what
love
you
this scene.
do in a horror movie to survive. And then he gets a phone call and he turns around and is like, they found the principal's body hanging from the goalpost, gutted. And like, to me, this doesn't make sense because all of them leave to go see it, but it's like, are the police gonna let them see all? Ain't they gonna be
Bro,
gone?
like if somebody
See the
called
put.
you and said, "Hey, man, our principal's hanging by the goalpost," you would be like, "Well, shit, let's go see if we can check it out."
Yep,
I
small
don't
town
As a
things,
high
man.
school
I don't
Small
kid,
know,
town
small
things.
town, small town,
that is
man.
like legit 100%. You're gonna be like, "Well, shit, let's see if we can go check it out."
That's a small town thing, I think, man.
Oh
I
yeah,
get
but trust me, when
right,
I understand that because I grew up in a small town, like
right.
a town with you would sneeze at one end and somebody would say "bless you" at the end.
Right. No, man, I love this scene. Other than, I mean, I get what you're saying, but I really love Randy the character. So this scene is kind of like his best scene to me. I mean, we kind of skipped over the movie store in a good way because that scene is not really. It doesn't do a whole lot for me, but I love his. There are certain rules that one must abide by to successfully survive a horror movie. Love that quote. I say it all the time. It's a great line. And then I don't know if we're here yet, but there's a little Easter egg. Randy is about to get stabbed, where he goes, and Halloween's playing, and Michael Myers is about to creep up behind Laurie Strode, and he says, "Look out, Jamie!" And that's kind of an Easter egg because the actor who plays him is Jamie Kennedy, and so haha, look out behind you, Jamie, and right behind him is Ghostface who stabs him. So that's like really why I love this scene is the meta behind it.
As many times as I've seen, love this movie, I never ever noticed that. So I'm very glad that you said that. That's very cool to hear. I love the third act of this film. To me, it's just as good as the first act of the film. Now,
Yes.
maybe not opening scene, but it keeps switching around. I mean, upon rewatch, you're right. Like you can see the nuances and things, and it's very obvious who the killer is. You don't. To me, you can say it all you want to, but I really don't think anybody could have guessed that there would be two killers. Even if you tried to figure out the killer, to me, I don't think you ever would figure out that there was two. And the fact that this third act keeps switching around who the killer is it the dad because they tried to push that it might be Sydney's dad coming back into
Right.
town. They find the car. Is it Cotton Weary? Is it who is it really Billy? So like I said, I really love the third act of this film. The garage door kill withstanding.
And so, interesting note about that last act. As far as I know, they shot that all in like one really long night. Is that right? Like one really long. They called it slasher boot camp, if I'm not mistaken. Like they were put through the ringer. They all were at that one house at that one location. They only had that location for a certain amount of time, and they filmed forever to get all that stuff in. So I know people. I mean, they had shirts made after the fact that I survived house whatever the name of the house was, and so that's
Mike,
actually really cool to know.
Mike, I actually read an article today that said that that last scene in the house took them 21 days to film all of that.
Oh,
They
sorry,
said,
wrong thing.
see, they said that it was the longest one night.
That's what
No,
it
you were right.
was.
They
That's
said
what I meant.
it was the longest one night. The longest scene in a horror movie ever.
Right. That's what I meant. Is that it was like it's like a really long time to film one freaking night. Right. 21 days. My ass. Man, kill
Yeah.
me instead. Just kill me off. I'm done here.
21-day fix, baby.
Oh, jeez.
Sydney, she's fighting Ghostface. She goes back, she gets the gun, and she shuts Stuart and Randy outside. And then we see Billy get up. He's hobbling down. He actually falls down the stairs. He lets them in. Then he's talking about how it's red corn syrup or something. It's the same stuff they use in Carrie. So we're starting to think we're getting to the reveal now that it was Billy who actually did kill him. Then they let Randy in. Billy shoots Randy. He doesn't die, but he falls out. Then Stewart comes in, and they start talking about how they start bringing up references to Hannibal Lecter, Janet Leigh from Psycho. they then they start taking turns stabbing each other, and this is where Stewart's acting is kind of a
Oh,
little
you don't.
what I call.
Oh,
We got see. Here's another difference we have. It's kind of extra, as I call it. He's like, I think I'm dying, man. I think I'm dying. You went a little too deep.
you cut me deep, man.
Well, I think that just plays to his character, though, man.
Yeah.
He's a little crazy, and you got to be a little crazy to just start killing people due to peer pressure, man.
Peer
So,
pressure, man.
It's just too much.
Watch a couple movies, take a couple notes. It was fun.
Then they bring, Sydney's dad out. They're painting the picture of how they're going to frame him that he done it, even though Stewart puts the voice thing right back in his pocket with his fingerprints all over it. Then Sydney starts to fight back. Or Gail gets the gun. She sneaks in and gets the gun because they can't find it. But she forgets to turn the safety off, so they knock her down on top of Deputy Dewey. Then Sydney's missing, and she comes out of the closet with the ghost face mask on and an umbrella. She stabs Billy with it twice. Then her and Stewart get into a little battle. They start wrestling, fall over the couch and all that. Then I think this is pretty obvious, a Nightmare on Elm Street 3 reference.
Yes.
Where she drops a TV on his head and she kills Stewart that way.
Oh, I love that.
That was a good kill. That's up there with one of my favorite kills. Yeah.
Love that kill. That's my favorite kill of the movie.
My worst.
Oh, that's because you hate the movie, obviously.
And then Billy gets on top of Sydney, but Gail comes in and shoots. She shoots Billy right in the collarbone area with the gun. He falls down. Then this is where Randy tells Gail and Sydney, this is where the final killer always has one last minute where he sits up. He opens his eyes, sits up, and bam, Sydney pops him right in the head with a gun, and it's over. So, what's y'all's brief thoughts on this final scene in the house? Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I mean, they actually argued whether or not to even have motivation for the killers or not at all. I think, so I think they ended up doing both to kind of make all parties happy, where they had, Billy's pissed because her mom slept with his dad and broke them up and that marriage and whole thing. And then Stu's just, peer pressure, like we talked about earlier. There's, realistically, how much of this third act could have, really happened? Yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where you have to suspend your belief a little bit. But I really enjoy like I said, the third act of this film just as much as I do the first. So I think it's great.
Oh, okay. So I love the Randy stuff. I know you didn't, but I love Stu in this final act. Like, I think I know it's supposed to be a horror, but his comedy doesn't take me out of it because it's almost sick. It's almost kind of twisted and demented in a way where he's like, my parents are going to be so mad at me. Like, I don't know. Like, I like his one-liners. I understand it's a little hokey for some, but it didn't turn me off of it at all. And I like the fact that there were two killers, because a lot of the kills in this, when you go back, a lot of the kills make a lot more sense when you have two people doing them. And so I really thought that was well done. And so I love the way Sydney, and I love how they involve Gail. She's not one of the teenagers, which is kind of normally the ones who survive. She's not one of those. She's just a adult character in this movie. I love how that works. And so I thought they did really well, man. And again, I love the gore in this final scene. I'm not a big blood and guts guy, but I love how much blood they use, and they're taking turns stabbing each other. I thought it was great. I know it's not for everyone, but I really loved it.
I will touch on one thing real quick before we get into the debate on this movie. There's two scenes that I forgot that I didn't really take great notes on that I thought were good. Was in the video store scene where Randy and Stewart and Billy were all, Randy's going, horror movie nerd times 10 at his job, freaking out. I was like, this is what the horror movie guy does. Like, it's so obvious that it's him.
I know, me too.
It could be me, and it could frame me. I really like that scene. I I didn't take great notes on that part, but that is a great scene. And one scene that I didn't take a lot of notes on was after Tatum's death, Billy and Sydney go to the room. She finally, gives up the box to him after, and then this is where they kind of this is when Stewart sneaks in, and fake kills Billy. So I did skip those scenes by mistake in my note taking, but they were two of my favorite scenes as well, though.
So they got around one of Randy's rules, and I think this is something a lot of people don't realize is they got around one of Randy's rules, which is never have sex. They got around that with Sydney because she had sex with the killer. And so I think that was the reason that she ended up surviving was because, well, she had sex with the killer instead of just some random scrub off the street. Like she had sex with the killer. So I think that's another little Easter egg they don't really mention a lot, but I've watched the director's commentary and they talk about it in that. I know Drew's just ready to shit all over this final scene, so please go ahead.
Let's do. Y'all want to do our rankings first, then get into it, or do y'all want to just go ahead and jump into the debate?
I mean, you already know where my favorite is Drew. Favorite kill, Drew. Worst.
Okay.
What was that favorite of yours, Mike? What was your favorite?
Oh, wow. You like the garage kill more than the stew kill?
Yeah, the stew
Oh.
kill. I'm just like a TV on his fucking face. I'm just like,
That's Nightmare on Elm Street 3, brother.
Hey, if Freddy Krueger's head would have popped out, it would have been better. My favorite death, I'm just going to give it a tie between Casey and Tatum. I like both of their deaths. And my least favorite kill is either the principal or the cameraman, the quick throat slit.
Right.
But, that one wasn't supposed to be elaborate. Brian, what was yours?
Well, I mean, mine's probably the same as Mike's. Mine's going to be the Drew Barrymore kill at the beginning is obviously the favorite. Worst kill, I don't like the garage door kill at all. That's my favorite, or that's my worst one. If I have to, and I'll throw it out, like my ranking for this movie is a 9.5.
So my favorite kill is Drew Barrymore, like everyone else most of the time. It's not Stu. I know I said that, but I slip up sometimes. It's definitely my number 2 though. So screw you, Drew. My least favorite kill is the cameraman, but obviously, I mean that wasn't supposed to be elaborate. But if we're gonna go least favorite, it's definitely a tie between that and the garage door. Since he threw his out there, my rating for this is a 9. I love this movie. I can pop this movie in anytime and enjoy it. It's rewatchable to me. I understand it's not the scariest film of all time. I don't think it was supposed to be. It was supposed to kind of flip the horror genre on its head, and it did that. And so not the scariest movie of all time, but it's a 9 for me. Anytime I want to, I can rewatch it and be entertained.
I'm gonna let Nico drop his ranking on this, and then I'm gonna throw a curveball for y'all.
Oh boy, okay. So I didn't write it down like I did for Halloween, but just off my just off how I'm feeling after watching it, when I was 6 or 7 years old, and then rewatching it a few times, I'm gonna go with an 8.5. I think the first time you watch it, it might be a 9.5 the first time you watch it. To me, the extraness of all the extra meta is kind of too much at some points. But the opening scene is amazing. It's incredible. The first time you watched it, I think all of the Ghostface calls are very, very tense, and they put you in a weird state of feeling to me. I think Neve Campbell as Sydney, she's great. I like Jamie Kennedy, Randy, a lot in this movie. Actually, I don't like Deputy Dewey, but I think considering this movie is 23 years old, I think it holds up well still. And this movie changed the genre a lot. It reawoke the genre a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very meta, yes, but I still like it. 8.5. Drew, what's yours?
It had a lot of copycats, by the way.
I am actually gonna go, and this might surprise y'all because everybody thinks I fucking hate this show. I mean this movie, but I'm actually gonna go 9.5 on the movie rating here.
There we go.
Total package, like it's got a little bit of everything. Like even though I don't consider it your quintessential horror movie, but as far as the total movie package, it's got everything. You got a great musical score goes with it. Great actors. Yes, there's some moments in there, but what movie doesn't have bad moments? So right. It's a 9.5 for me. I would, if it came on TNT, I would watch it every time.
So real quick, before we get into why most people are listening to this, How do you guys feel about the Ghostface costume? See,
It's so cheesy, but that it works though. To
I
me.
think it kind of
Cheesy,
works.
but it works.
I think its intention was to be as plain and simple as possible.
Anybody could get the costume.
Right, I think that's the kind of the point is because
Right.
unlike all the rest of our slasher favorites, different people have been Ghostface each time there's been a movie or even the TV series. So I kind of understand that anybody can go. I mean, they even talk about it in the police department scene where anybody can go to this dime store and get it anytime they want. And so I think that kind of helps a little bit. I've always liked the mask. The mask I love. It's been used throughout pop culture still to this day for lots of stuff. I know football players wear it after they score a touchdown or have an interception.
Man.
Yeah, so I mean that's definitely again it's still a relevant pop culture item to this day. So again, a movie that kind of shook the ground and it's still relevant.
Well, in the 90s, you talk about that mask in the 90s. When you were trick-or-treating, every single year, there were 10 or 15 kids that had scream
And I
masks.
had one that pumped blood, like it
Yeah.
had like a little pump and it had
Exactly.
blood and it shot up in the mask.
And
Love
like
that.
you said, the point could be anybody could be Ghostface, and
Right.
that was a point, like you said.
Yeah, I actually wrote that down too. Actually ranked that mask number 3 overall in the horror genre.
That makes
Behind Jason and Michael Myers.
Right.
It's the third most recognizable.
Oh, for sure.
And a fun fact about that mask is the studio actually didn't think the mask was scary enough. Wes Craven had to convince them it was.
Yep.
They had to do like sample, recordings to convince them. It's like, hey man, this mask is, it's scary, it'll work. And so the studio really wasn't a believer in it at first, but the OG Wes Craven had to convince them otherwise.
It got picked up by 2 different agencies. At first, it wasn't going to get picked up by a major studio, and then the Weinstein brothers picked it up.
Right.
And actually,
Actually, some famous directors actually turned this movie down. Quentin Tarantino was one of them. There was someone else that's coming up blank though. But I'm gonna read a definition, and we're gonna jump into this debate. You ready, guys?
Do it.
The definition of meta horror: horror movies that acknowledge the events occurring are like a horror movie. So this is kind of the great debate between all of us. Mike, do you want to start this off, or Brian?
I'm gonna let Drew start it off. He's been chomping at the bit, man. And so, and by the way, I'm okay with difference of opinion. Like we all rated this movie high, so we clearly all like the movie. We just have a different definition of how the movie should be classified.
Let's get ready to rumble. Go ahead, Drew.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say I get so much flack for it because everybody thinks I hate the movie. I do not hate the movie. I absolutely love this movie, but to me, it's gotta have its own classification. It really does. It's kind of like a horror comedy mixture between the both of them because he plays on the satire the whole way through, oh, this is what people really think this is what's going to happen during a horror movie. And then he's like, guess what? It kind of went that way, but then again, it's not. I just love the fact that it just keeps you guessing all the way through. It just does. It's not a horror movie for me, though. It's not a horror movie. It's a slasher for sure. But to me, there's so many comic relief in it, like with Dewey and with what's his name?
Randy and Stu, but
Stu.
In their defense, they're both kind of comedic people. You know what I mean?
I get that.
Right,
I get that.
Right.
But I'm just saying, for me, again, it's not a big deal for me, to say, it's not a great movie. It's a great movie.
Right.
I just don't classify it as a horror movie.
Right, because Freddy is funny. Freddy Krueger is funny.
Exactly.
So even in slashers like that, he has funny lines and funny scenes. So humor in horror exists. As a matter of fact, Tobe Hooper really wanted that first Texas Chainsaw Massacre to be a dark comedy. And he probably shot the wrong damn thing because that movie is not funny at all in any way. Part 2 is actually really hilarious. But anyway, so again, that exists within the genre. Halloween 2018 used it. There's a lot of funny scenes in that movie, and I wouldn't consider that necessarily a horror comedy. It's a satire. And by the way, the great writers of our time, not to sound like a jerk here, but the greatest writers of our time use satire. Billy Shakespeare used satire all the time in his big plays. And so, again, I understand what you're saying. It makes there is some funny elements, and it is very meta, like Nico said. It's the most meta film I've ever seen. But I wouldn't say it's a spoof, because a spoof is a mimic.
No.
And that's what Scary Movie ended up being, which is a freaking mimic of the Wazab, and he's got like the sideways ghost mask and stuff. And so I get that, but if that opening scene, and there's a couple other scenes in here where the tension is great. They shoot it like a real horror movie, but it's kind of
They shoot it like what? They shoot it like a real horror
movie, which makes it a real horror movie.
Destroyed your own argument with
No, that makes it a real horror movie.
I'm just saying, like, you sitting there saying, like, yeah, there's like comedy mixed in with some of these, like with Jason or with Freddy or whatever.
Comedy and Jason.
Freddy are like one or two scenes. You're talking about a whole movie that has them throughout the whole movie.
I think that the acting of Jamie Kennedy and Matthew Lillard, for some people, kind of takes away from the realness of the movie. But I guess because they're just comedic actors. I'm going to let Brian get his piece in. Because, again, it's kind of funny. You wrote a piece on this in high school, Drew, and I wrote a piece on this in college about our sides of the argument. So it's kind of funny. We both
Which is hilarious. And here we are.
Right.
Here we are. What 10 years later, and here we are.
At least
like a random pod that we made together as friends.
I know. And so I'm a big fan of the movie. I'm going to defend it, and I know you're not trashing the movie. But
never.
I do think there's enough in it to classify it as a horror. If you want to say black comedy, I'm fine with it. If you really want to go there, but I would consider it a horror film. All right, Brian.
Yeah, Brian.
Help a brother out. Come on.
No, I'm with you 100%. I really do think that you could definitely call this a horror film, but I also think that people throw that around, like for Alien, for instance. It's science fiction, but it's also considered horror. Now, Aliens 2 isn't, but Alien is also considered horror.
Yeah, right. No, the original Alien is a horror film.
Right, exactly. And so, I mean, that's why I think, honestly, that's why a lot of people have started just referring to these things as slashers, I think, just get away from the whole category. But, if you're saying, hey, is this horror, is this not horror? I mean, I think if you're going to put Halloween in there, and if you're going to put Nightmare on Elm Street in there, yeah, I mean, of course, I think Scream's right up there with it, and I think it definitely is a horror movie.
I think it's kind of a combination. I don't think it's standalone horror. I think that might be my biggest hang up on it. It's not standalone horror.
Right.
If that makes sense. It's not standalone horror.
I would agree with that.
I don't obviously
right,
I do not
right.
think
I understand what you're saying.
Horror at all.
There's some great parts in it that are hilarious. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not acknowledging that. But if you think Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare is horror, then this is horror too.
Freddy's Dead.
Well, I don't.
Okay, then that's fine. Because what's our line here? Because the last 3 Nightmare on Elm Streets are not horror.
Well, I mean, it's obviously a personal choice on what you feel like different things are, which is the great thing about this. But I would say
absolutely.
Without Scream, I don't think we would have got some of the franchises we got in the early 2000s.
Because
horror genre.
Right.
Scream is what produced all them other ones that came after it. They're like, oh yes, we can make horror movies and we can make a good buck off of it.
Right.
So
right.
So like that, I totally acknowledge. Like without Scream, I don't think some of the movies that I went and seen in 2003, 2004 would have been made.
So because of Scream, we got the rush of horror again. And that's not even just a slasher movie. Talking about, I Know What You Did Last Summer is kind of a slasher. The Faculty and all that stuff. Hey, don't you shit on I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Come on.
I love that movie. Anyway, and even Halloween H2O can thank Scream for being in existence at all, because it's meta, but not so meta like Scream. And so there's a lot of the horror genre can thank Scream for reviving it, for being.
Oh yeah.
And then the Blair Witch kind of took that and flipped it again and made it even more popular. And so every now and then a movie comes along that kind of changes the genre. And Blair Witch, whether you like that movie or not, did it. Scream did it. Heck, Nightmare on Elm Street did it. Halloween, the original one didn't. So there's always a next movie. And Saw kicked off the torture porn.
Mhm.
And by the way, they do it better than any other torture porn franchise. Like,
So-
they do it better than everyone else.
So, like, the biggest thing I can say right here is no matter what I say, no matter what you say right here, numbers do not lie. Scream earned 173 million worldwide,
Golly, man.
becoming the highest grossing slasher film until the release of Halloween 2018.
Wow.
That
almost
that is
kinda,
big numbers.
and I know I ranked. I was about to give a spoiler. I know I'm a big fan of Halloween 2018, but Scream's a better film to me.
No.
Oh,
Uh,
Scream's a better film to me.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's all I got. No, I love them both, by the way.
All right, I'll just give my quick thoughts on this real quick after just listening to you guys, because I see all three of you guys' point of view, honestly.
Well, I mean,
To me-
them two, and then there's me. Which one y'all, Nico?
To me, this movie was very scary the first time I seen it, but the more I watch it, the more I think it's funny. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
To me, I lose after watching so many horror movies and slashers since this has been out.
Right.
To me, after the first scene, I lose the tension that makes a slasher movie or a horror movie throughout the movie. Y'all brought up Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street. To me, those movies keep the tension throughout the whole movie, even if
Right.
there are funny scenes. To me, the screams, I don't feel really scared at all watching it. But it does, it makes fun. It makes fun of like how people acting in the horror and slasher movies. And I heard Mike bring up the part about, Jamie Kennedy is yelling about, an actress named Jamie, telling her to turn around when he was supposed to turn around. I really like all of that.
Yeah.
To me, it's kind of hard to like categorize this movie because it's so different than all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what, I guess that's what really created meta horror. I mean, I can't be disrespectful to the movie and say it's not horror, because
No, that's why I said
it
it's
is
combo.
horror.
Yeah.
But it's got a lot of comedic,
Right. Right.
But then I think Mike said it best, or he said it in one of our previous films, that a lot of comedians and horror writers, they feed into that. They both genres feed into each other.
They do.
Because
Absolutely.
you see a guy like Jordan Peele, he's famous from Key and Peele as a comedian, and now he's writing, horror movies now. So, but yeah, I understand where all three of you guys are coming from. Drew, you got anything else you want to say?
No, I mean that's it. Like my thing is like to me it should be classified as a combo. It's just not a standalone horror, and in my opinion, everybody not agree with it, which
Right.
is fine. It's just a person. I mean, obviously it's a personal preference.
Right.
That's it. That's all I was gonna say on it. I still love you, Mike.
I still love you too. I think my only argument really against it was, and we're kind of on the same side of the coin, I'm willing to acknowledge that it has some comedy in it, but at the same time, I mean, I know a lot of horror films that I like that also have some comedy in them. And so I get what you're saying. There's maybe a little bit overdone here. I understand that, but I love it for that, I guess. I guess I just like it for those reasons. Is that kind of like flip some of those ha-ha horror tropes on their head and make them even better. And so that's kind of why I love the film. And again, there's the last three Nightmare on Elm Street movies. They're not really scary at all. But Freddy became a character of himself. He became he became funny Freddy, and there was no turning back. And so I think, I get what you're saying, but I'm still going to stick with it being a horror film. It's definitely a slasher film. I mean, we all agree it's a really good slasher film. Like, it's a really good whodunit, by the way. It's
Exactly.
a really good whodunit. Like, maybe my favorite whodunit ever.
No matter what your opinion is, I mean, you're not wrong about it. It's your opinion.
Right.
It's just,
Right.
This was just a discussion amongst all of us. Excuse me. But on the Freddy thing, didn't the studio kind of push him further and further away from the dark humor and made him into the, the
Absolutely.
funny guy?
Oh, absolutely.
So they kind of ruined the Freddy character themselves, really.
And Robert Englund ain't going to stop cashing them checks, so I don't blame him.
You got to make that money now.
Here's one thing we can all agree on as I watch Scream right in front of me here. Nev Campbell in 96.
She can get it. She got it then. She can get it now.
Well, hey, and the last thing that I'll say too about this is, I really think that if you're trying to say that it's a horror movie and it being a horror movie, it has to deal with something that none of the other horror movies ever have had to deal with, and that is the popularity of that Scary Movie franchise that came out.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There are parts of when you try to remember Scream, you think you'll remember a part of Scary Movie and think that it's part of that. Oh, okay, well maybe that was part of it, and that was such a huge part of pop culture because Scary Movie 1 and 2 with the Wayans brothers doing them was so huge, and I would like to see the box office numbers on that. But that's something, like I said, that Scream had to deal with that they didn't have to.
Fun fact that Scream was originally titled Scary
Movie.
Yep.
So, no, I agree. But by the way, I'm glad you touched on that because I forgot completely about that. That definitely affected Scream in the way of your consciousness. I think a lot of people sometimes, if you're not horror people like us, confuse the two. There's definitely some confusion there with just like a casual moviegoer because they both have the Ghostface mask. And I think that they both think of them as all the time silly haha. And there's definitely some silly haha in Scream. But Scary Movie is
278 million.
That's a lot of damn money.
278 million
Or a
off
spoof.
The spoof of Scream.
That's insane, man.
Wow.
Insane.
Well, to be on the other side of the fence of Brian, not to just argue with him, but I feel like Scream was so easy to spoof because it had so much comedy in it.
Well, because it made fun of itself.
Right.
Yeah, but like I can't remember what Scream it is, but they reference Saw with Dr. Phil and all that. But if anybody ever thinks of a Saw movie, nobody thinks of that scene. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I guess the self-awareness of the Scream franchise and Scary Movie just play into each other so much that it is easy just to confuse it.
Well, no, I mean, and I think that you can kind of see with Scream 2. I think Scream 2 has a lot less comedy in it because of that reason.
It does.
And I think because they are aware of the fact that Scary Movie was a spoof of them, they wanted to kind of go more the other way.
Right. Mm-hmm. I think Scream 2, that script, even though I'm pretty sure he wrote it pretty soon after he probably wrote Scream, he had an idea for a sequel, I think it's a reaction to, I think a lot of Scream 2 is a reaction to Scream 1, where maybe a lot of people didn't take it that seriously. If you watch Scream 2, and I just watched it the other night because I just, was in the mood for it and I wanted some context for Scream 1, it's a lot less funny. There's a lot less haha in Scream 2. And Scream 3, which I don't really care for all that much, there's definitely a lot less funny in that. And since we're on it, Scream 4, I love. And there's not a lot of humor in Scream 4. Not a lot of humor in Scream 4.
Well, I love the first half of Scream 4 that Kevin Williamson wrote, but you can see exactly where the writers
you can.
that wrote Scream 3 picked it up. Like when the cop scene where they're joking around, yeah.
But the character of Kirby in Scream 4 is great. Anyway,
I would have to go back and watch 2 through 4 or whatever it is because you
can skip 3.
I can tell you 1. I watched 1 a bunch of times. The rest of them, maybe once or twice.
Go watch the opening scene to Scream 2.
Scream 2 is great.
Yeah.
Scream 2 is awesome, man. And Scream 3 you could probably skip. I'm not going to lie to you. You could skip it, and you really won't miss anything because Scream 4 doesn't. Scream 3 retcons Scream 1, and then Scream 4 kind of fixes it a little bit. And so I'm kind of glad. But anyway, I like the whole Scream franchise as a whole. I mean, I think by the way, we don't get this in a lot of our slasher franchises, and I'll stop talking here, but you get a lot of the same actors playing the same characters, and that's very rare in a slasher franchise. Very, very rare.
Well, guys, that was a great Scream debate of 2019.
Hey, we were a little nicer than we thought. Sorry.
Yeah, I knew we was gonna all, we're all grown. We're all horror fans. I knew we wasn't gonna be, like Stephen A. and Skip Bayless on Tim Tebow kind of arguing at each other. But
the disrespect.
Hey, tweet the podcast account. Let us know your thoughts on the Scream franchise. Let us know your thoughts on the Scream movie. We really, really enjoy interacting with you guys.
Absolutely, man.
And we appreciate all of your listens, all of your feedback. we're on iTunes now. We got our mentions blown up the other day about getting our ass on iTunes, and we
So
are
thank
on
you
there,
for that.
y'all.
Thank
And
you
we
for that.
appreciate it, guys. We appreciate all of the concerns to make us better. We appreciate it. And for episode 4, we're going to be reviewing. We're finally going to get to my favorite, the greatest slasher of all time, Jason Voorhees from Camp Crystal Lake. We're going to be reviewing Friday the 13th, Part 4. We're going to be talking about Tommy Jarvis, Crispin Glover's awesome dance moves,
Crispin Glover, man.
all the good stuff. I'm not going to say where it ranks on my Friday the 13th list yet,
We
but
gotta
it's
give them
coming
something
soon.
to listen to.
Yeah, it's coming. Just stay tuned, alert, like DJ Khaled said. Oh, and stay tuned on Halloween. Your boy might be having a giveaway coming up soon because he appreciates all the fan support. All right, everybody, say goodbye to all of our fans real quick.
And
Brian?
y'all tweet y'all support for me. Y'all let Mike know that my
Oh.
stance is right. Hashtag Team Drew.
Mike, do you want
I'm
to say something else real quick?
Hey, real quick, keep your ears open on Halloween as well. That's all I say. A little tease, and that's a little teaser. Keep your podcast feeds open.
Stay tuned, alert. Stay tuned, alert.
Yeah. Stay ready. Stay ready, like Sydney did in Scream 1.
That's right. We appreciate you guys listening and interacting with us, guys. We're coming back soon.
Yeah, we appreciate you guys. Thank you.